Hey guys, tonight we're taking a step into the smoky, shadowed past of medieval weddings, where the air is thick with incense, sweat, and the sheer weight of obligation. You're not just hearing the story, you're in it. You trudge through muddy cobblestones, your woolen tunic scratchy against your skin, and a clanging bell from the village chapel echoes overhead. Villagers line the narrow street, not to celebrate your joy, but to gawk at the strange theatre that a wedding has become. Chickens scatter as you pass. A small child wipes their nose on your sleeve, and someone's baking something that smells suspiciously like burnt turnips. You're about to be married, not because you met someone and fell head over heels, no, but because your father owes the local baron to goats and half a haystack. As you approach the church door, your boots squelching through the muck, the old wooden frame looms like a maw waiting to swallow you whole. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to comment your location and local time. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the threshold of the chapel, heart pounding like a slow drum. It's dark inside, the kind of dimness that smells like mold and ancient incense, and the only light comes from thin candles mounted in iron sconces. Their flames flicker wildly as a draught snakes down the stone nave, whispering through your cloak. You step forward, flanked by your father and the baron's steward, both more concerned with dowries and legal bindings than your happiness. Your bride is already at the altar. You squint, trying to see her face beneath the heavy veil that looks like it was dyed in someone's barn. She's short, really short, and she's trembling. A girl, really. The law allows marriage as early as 12, and in some parts, even younger if the church gives a little nod and the family is powerful enough. You glance toward the priest, who's flipping through a worn leather-bound book that smells like old meat and mildew. He's not smiling. No one is, well, except the steward, who's quietly tallying how many pigs this match will consolidate between your two families. Romantic, right? This isn't about love, it's a social transaction, wrapped in hymns and cold stone. The priest begins to chant, and you try to follow along. But the Latin slips past your ears like a fog you can't wade through. Your bride doesn't speak. She doesn't even look up. Her hands, tiny and pale, clutch a posy of herbs not for beauty, but to hide the scent of unwashed bodies. That's your cue to say, I do, but your mouth is dry. You manage a croaked affirmation, unsure whether you've just married a child or merely become a pawn in someone else's chess game. Historians still argue whether most medieval peasants understood the religious significance of marriage, or if it was simply another rite imposed by the church to regulate family alliances and inheritance. Either way, you're locked in now. The ring, a thin band of iron because gold is for nobility, slides onto her finger. With some difficulty, she flinches not from the ring, but from the sudden bellow of a cow outside. Even the livestock are unsettled by this holy union. You both kneel for a blessing, the stone floor cold and wet beneath your knees. The priest drones on, asking for divine protection over your new household, and you try not to yawn. Not because you're bored, but because you only got 4 hours of sleep after helping slaughter a pig for the feast. More on that disaster later. As the ceremony ends, you and your new bride are instructed to walk hand in hand down the aisle. It's not a joyous exit. It's more like being paraded through a gallery of judgment. Everyone's watching. The neighbor, whose pig you borrowed last harvest. The widow who swears she saw your bride's mother cavorting with the miller. Even your old friend, who may or may not have fancied her before you, were both swept into this farce. Outside, a few children throw stale grain in your direction. It's symbolic, though it mostly just gets stuck in your cloak. A village drunk yells hoorah before falling face first into a mud puddle. You're now officially married, whatever that means. You're still cold, still hungry, and somehow now legally responsible for a person who probably hasn't hit puberty yet. And let's not forget, the church is thrilled, not because they believe in your love, but because marriage meant more souls under God's order and more stability for landowners who needed bloodlines and heirs. You mount a cart, yes, a cart, because horses are expensive and rattle down. A rocky path to your family's longhouse, where the celebration, if you can call it that, will begin. Along the way, your new bride sneezes from the dust kicked up by the wheels. You offer her a cloth from your belt, but she just stares forward, as though this is happening to someone else. Maybe it is. Maybe it's happening to you, too. Back at the house, someone's already singing off-key, and a few neighbors have begun roasting something questionable over an open fire. Your cousin hands you a mug of watered-down ale and slaps your back. Welcome to the rest of your life, he says with a wink that doesn't quite mask the pity in his eyes. The wind whistles through the cracks in the wooden walls, and you shiver despite the fire. Somewhere inside, a goat bleats angrily. You married into wealth. Well, sort of. She brought 3 chickens and a decent comb. But more importantly, you're now bound by law, by church, and by community to uphold the sanctity of this marriage. Even if the sanctity smells like unwashed feet and fermented cabbage. The truth is, no one really asked if you wanted this, and if you had refused, you might have been cast out, disinherited, or worse, replaced by your younger brother, who's already lurking round the cider jug with suspicious enthusiasm. That's the thing about medieval weddings. They were rarely about people, or about power, about aligning households, merging wealth, and locking down labor for future generations. In some regions, a marriage contract could be signed even before the couple was born. Parents shaking hands over soup and sealing the fate of children who weren't even crawling yet. And if one party died before the wedding, sometimes the living partner would still go through with the ceremony. Posthumous marriage, real thing, look it up. Not that you can, because you live in the 1300s and literacy is reserved for monks and a few lucky nobles. A pig squeals from the side yard. Someone throws a bone into the fire. You raise your ale and toast to your future. May it be short, warm, and mostly plague-free. The bride, still mute, is led away by your mother to be dressed for the bedding ceremony, and your stomach twists not from excitement, but from dread. You glance back toward the chapel. It looks so peaceful now, in the distance, bathed in moonlight and silence, like none of this ever happened, but it did. And it's only just begun, asterisk. You sit stiffly on a splintered wooden bench as the village fiddler saws away at a tune that sounds like 2 cats arguing over a dead fish. And the wedding feast begins, or at least the approximation of one. The entire room smells like smoke, ale, and boiled onions. A large pig's head, already greying at the edges, is placed on a wobbly table as the centerpiece, its eyes still open, staring at you as if to say, "You think you had a rough day. You're hungry, but you hesitate. Not because you're being polite, but because you're not entirely sure that pig died today." A platter of coarse brown bread, harder than your boots, circles the room, and a boy drops a chunk onto your plate with the enthusiasm of someone handing you a rock. You chew slowly, careful not to lose a tooth, and glance over at your bride, who's perched silently beside you like a porcelain doll on the edge of a fire pit. Her small fingers toy nervously with the edge of her linen sleeve. You try to say something comforting, but the words catch in your throat. Because really, what can you say to someone who just became your wife and doesn't even look old enough to carry a bucket of water alone? You're both hostages to duty. And tonight's feast is less of a celebration and more of a grim reminder that your lives are no longer your own. Around you, the village murmurs, eats, and occasionally bursts into laughter. Someone jokes about how many sons you'll have. Someone else makes a loud bet on how soon she'll get pregnant. You laugh awkwardly, clutching your mug of weak ale, like it's a shield. This is normal here. Expected. Love. Romance. That's for courtly poets and nobles who can afford to pretend. For most, marriage is about economics. If your family has a cow and hers has a field, then suddenly you're planning a life together. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants found ways to fall in love within their arranged unions, or whether affection was simply a luxury none of them had time for. Either way, tonight isn't about passion. It's about politics on a very small scale. You're not entirely unhappy, just unsettled. The same way someone might feel right before stepping onto a rickety rope bridge they have no choice but to cross. You reach for a second piece of bread and nearly knock over the pitcher of ale. Your uncle roars with laughter, slaps you on the back hard enough to jolt your kidneys, and slurs something about your wedding night. You try not to grimace. You've heard the rumors. You've seen the rituals. The dreaded bedding ceremony. Your cheeks flush, not from alcohol, but from knowing that soon your personal life is about to become very, very public. In the corner, an old woman dances with a goose. Not part of the ceremony, just something she does when she's had too much cider. You wish you were the goose. A trencher of stoof, you can call it, that arrives. Floating in the thin brown broth is a piece of something unidentifiable and grey. You poke it cautiously with your spoon, trying not to breathe through your nose. Quirky fact, in some regions, it was customary to serve porcupine at noble weddings, or at least fashion a porcupine out of other animals, complete with spines made of shaved pastry. You're no noble, that your porcupine is more likely a rat with ideas. Still, you eat it. Hunger outweighs dignity. Your father stands to make a toast, voice booming and slurred. He praises your union, the joining of two respectable families, and thanks the local lord for not taxing your land too heavily this year. Cheers erupt. You clink mugs. The bride sips water. She's pale and silent. A neighbor leans in, whispering that she's lucky his wife screamed all through their wedding night. You laugh because it's expected, but inside you feel like vomiting outside. Night has fully fallen. The stars blink overhead like they're embarrassed for you, and the wind howls faintly through the chinks in the timber walls. Somewhere a dog barks. You imagine it digging a hole and curling up inside. Not a bad idea, honestly. The feast wins on, and people grow rowdier. A cousin starts juggling turnips. Someone else starts arguing about whether St. Agnes or St. Margaret is the better patron for fertile marriages. Another declares that garlic under the bed guarantees a son. You wonder if there's enough garlic in the world to guarantee peace of mind. The bride is taken away again, this time by a gaggle of older women who giggle like schoolgirls and carry with them blankets, candles, and a suspicious-looking chicken. You try to ask why, but your question is drowned in a chorus of drunken singing. A moment later, you're being dragged literally, dragged toward the tiny room at the back of the house, your wedding chamber. The room is barely larger than a closet. The bed is straw and rope with 2 coarse woolen blankets, and there's a strange sweetish smell, like someone spilled wine and never cleaned it up. You blink in the candlelight, trying to adjust as the door opens again and the women return, guiding your bride into the room like she's walking to the gallows. Her eyes are downcast. They begin to hum, to chant, to recite crude little blessings for your fertility. And then someone makes a joke about proving manhood. You don't even blush anymore. You're past that. You're now in a surreal dream where your privacy is a concept so foreign it might as well be Latin. Then the worst part, they throw you both onto the bed. Literally, it's symbolic, it's tradition, and it's absolutely horrifying. In some regions, guests wouldn't leave until they saw proof of consummation linen sheets marked and paraded around. Historians still debate how often this actually happened versus how often it's just repeated for shock value. But you know this. Whether or not anyone stays to watch, the pressure is very real. The door shuts. Finally, silence. You sit there, heart pounding, eyes on your new bride who is still trembling, wrapped in one of the scratchy blankets like a frightened squirrel. You whisper something, anything, just to break the silence. She doesn't respond, just stares ahead, lost. You lie back, careful not to touch her, staring at the low ceiling, listening to the muffled party outside. Laughter, music, screams. Maybe a fight. Someone knocks over a table. Your eyelids grow heavy. Sleep would be a mercy. You wonder how long you can pretend to be asleep. Long enough to not have to perform the duty they expect. Long enough for this night to pass into the hazy realm of yesterday. You don't know. All you know is that you're married now. Married in the way your ancestors were. Married in the way tradition dictated. Married not by choice, but by the relentless momentum of history, family, and survival. Somewhere in the darkness, the bride finally exhales, a tiny breath, barely audible, but real. Maybe she's beginning to believe this is her life now. Or maybe, like you, she's hoping to wake up somewhere else entirely. The morning light slices through the cracks in the wooden shutters like judgment itself, and you wake up stiff, confused, and with straw in your mouth. Your bride is already awake, sitting silently at the farthest edge of the bed, as if afraid that physical contact might somehow make things worse. Her eyes are bloodshot. Not from tears, at least. None you saw, but from the sheer exhaustion of being paraded, inspected, and ultimately handed over like a piece of currency. You sit up slowly, unsure of what's expected now. Do you speak? Do you touch her shoulder and pretend this is normal? The truth is, neither of you knows the rules from here on out. The house is quiet for once. The riot of the wedding feast finally sobered into snoring bodies and overturned jugs. You step outside into the biting morning air, boots squelching in the dewy mud, and stare at the sky, still smeared with the last wisps of early fog. Somewhere a rooster crows, late to the job, but insistent. You feel heavy, not just from sleeplessness, but from the sheer weight of your new reality. You're married now, and not even a particularly enviable kind of married. You're tied to a child who probably doesn't understand what's happened, in a village that will judge your every move, under a church that believes your bond is sacred and unbreakable. And that's the curious part. While the priest blessed your marriage and muttered Latin incantations about divine will and eternal union, the concept of consent, especially hers, was barely a whisper in the ceremony. She stood there, trembling, and said the right words because she was told to. And you were given a choice, technically, but not really. Refuse, and your father loses his grazing rights. Accept, and you might secure a bit more bread through the winter. Historians still argue whether the idea of consent in medieval weddings had any meaningful weight, or whether it was simply a checkbox in a process designed more for property exchange than personal happiness. In fact, church law did technically require mutual consent, but in practice, especially among the lower classes, marriages were arranged, enforced, and sometimes even carried out by force. The idea of eloping out of love sounds poetic now, but back then, it could get you disowned, whipped, or worse, excommunicated. There were cases of girls being abducted and married against their will, only for the local bishop to shrug and say, "Well, she didn't say no after the fact, did she?" And if you think men had more power, think again. You may have been the groom, but that didn't make you the master of your fate. You were the vessel of your family's ambitions, a tool to extend a legacy, and a new set of hands to keep the plow moving. The irony is thick. You're standing here, married in the eyes of God and man, and yet you feel more like livestock than lord. You walk back inside and find your bride sitting at the hearth, her tiny form barely noticeable beside the large iron pots simmering with oats. She looks up briefly, then down again, returning to stirring as if she's been doing it her entire life. No words pass between you. There's an invisible wall, and neither of you dares cross it. Your mother bustles in moments later, clucking like a hen and throwing around orders about chores, livestock, and getting started on those babies. You nearly choke on your breakfast. You'd like to remind her that your wife still plays with dolls, but what would be the point? She wouldn't hear it. No one would. In this world, the purpose of marriage is not love, its production of food, of heirs, of more obedient little peasants to keep the economy of toil rolling forward. Later that day, you're assigned to mend the fence at the edge of the field, while your new wife is sent to the stream to wash linens. You steal a glance at her as she walks away, struggling slightly with the heavy basket. No one offers to help. She's a wife now expected to carry her weight whether she can or not. Your hands blister as you work the rough timber, and your mind drifts to the whispered stories you'd heard growing up. Tales of noblemen who married for politics, kings who took 12-year-old queens from foreign courts, and peasants who eloped and vanished into the woods, never to be seen again. You wonder if any of them found happiness. You wonder what happiness even means in a world where survival is the primary goal. A few days pass. Your routine begins to solidify into something resembling stability. You wake, you work, you eat, and you try not to think too hard. Your wife is quiet, efficient, and always in motion, scrubbing, hauling, sweeping. The awkwardness between you lingers, a thick fog neither of you seems brave enough to disperse. Then one afternoon, she speaks. Just a few words, asking if you'd like more stew. It's a simple moment, but it lands like a thunderclap. You nod, and she ladles the watery broth into your bowl. No smiles, no eye contact, but progress, perhaps. You eat in silence, staring at the fire. Across the room, your father sharpens a blade, and your mother is darning socks while muttering prayers under her breath. It's not peace, exactly, but it's not misery either. It's just life. Later that night, your bride places a sprig of rosemary under her pillow. You notice, but say nothing. It's an old superstition, one meant to encourage pleasant dreams, or maybe even fertility, depending on the region. Quirky customs like these weave through daily life like hidden threads. Some believe in them devoutly, others follow them just in case. You lie beside her again, both of you still tense, your bodies facing away from each other. You hear a dog howl outside, distant and eerie. Somewhere in your gut, you wonder if it's howling for her. For you. For every child forced to wear adult skin and smile through ceremonies they barely understand. You close your eyes and try to sleep, but questions crowd your mind. Is this it? Is this what marriage is? Are you meant to learn love, or simply outlast indifference? You think of the village drunk who once said, "A good marriage is like a good shoe. It hurts at first, then it fits, then it falls apart." You're not sure if he was wise or just deeply intoxicated, but either way it rings true. By the end of the week, the villagers stop calling your bride the girl and start calling her your wife, as if her identity has been absorbed into yours. She's no longer someone's daughter. She's yours now. Not in the romantic, poetic sense. In the practical, legal one. Her dowry, modest as it was, has been exchanged, and her labor is now expected as part of your household output. You notice the change in how people speak to her. Less kindly, less forgiving, because wives are expected to endure, to produce, to serve, and to never complain. Your neighbor's wife, 3 years older than yours, already has 2 children and a permanent limp from childbirth. She jokes about it while feeding pigs, but there's a weariness in her eyes that you can't ignore. You begin to notice that look everywhere in the women scrubbing, sewing, and sighing. It's a sort of quiet resignation, the knowledge that their lives were charted for them long before they understood what was happening. And the men, they carry it too, though differently. They drown it in drink, or bellow it into the wind, while chopping wood. You begin to see that none of you chose this path. You were all herded onto it by birth, expectation, and necessity. It's a strange comfort, that shared captivity. One evening, the priest stops by. He offers blessings and a side-eye toward your wife's stomach, clearly hoping for news of an impending child. You both shift uncomfortably. He leaves with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes, muttering something about patience and prayers. As he walks away, your wife whispers, "I'm not ready." You look at her, truly look, and nod. Me neither. It's the first real moment of connection you've had. And maybe, just maybe, that's where love begins, not with grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but with mutual understanding in the smallest, quietest spaces. Days become weeks, and your new life unfolds, not in dramatic waves, but in a quiet, grinding rhythm that slowly carves grooves into your soul. Each sunrise finds you with calloused hands gripping a wooden plow or repairing the same fence you just fixed last week, while your wife, still no older than a schoolgirl, labors with a kind of tired diligence that shouldn't belong to someone so young. She rises before the rooster, tends to the fire, hauls water, kneads dough with aching fingers, and listens without flinching to your mother's daily critiques of her housekeeping. You watch her grow leaner, more tired, more practiced. Sometimes you think she's turning into her own shadow. And through it all, no one questions the arrangement. Not the neighbors who exchange knowing glances. Not the priest who drops in, now and then, to mumble prayers about fertility and duty. Not even you, because the machine of society is too large and too old to resist. You remember, faintly, stories you heard in your boyhood, whispers of love matches and runaway brides, of couples who defied their families and lived in forest cottages on nothing but acorns and dreams. You used to believe those were real. Now, you suspect they were just stories the old folks told to make you believe your cage had no bars. Because here, in this village pressed between muddy fields and a chapel that smells like mold, there is no room for such extravagance. Marriage is not a celebration of hearts. It's a contract of survival, and in many ways, it's a contract signed without a voice. You think of consent again, that word the priest skipped over so quickly, the word that floats like a ghost above your household. Your wife may not have screamed, she may not have resisted, but that does not mean she chose this life. Historians still argue whether most women in medieval Europe understood the full implications of their wedding vows, or were simply shepherded through the motions, like livestock, through a gate. Some scholars suggest that noblewomen had more agency, especially if they were widows or heiresses. But in villages like yours, consent was something whispered about in foreign languages, not spoken aloud in your dialect. The marriage was arranged, the dowry exchanged, the bed shared. That was all that mattered. And yet, in the rare silences between your chores, in the dim candlelight after your parents fall asleep, you begin to discover something strange. Your wife has a voice. She tells you, in fragments, about her older sister who died during childbirth at 14, about the time she fell into the river trying to catch a frog, about how she used to dream of joining the nunnery just to escape the farm work. She tells you these things without looking at you, as though speaking to the fire or the walls, but you listen closely. Her stories become the only music in your life, not played by a drunken fiddler. One evening, as you sit on the threshold of your tiny home watching the moon rise, she sits beside you, not too close, not too far, and hands you a piece of honeycomb. You take it, surprised, and she just says, "Found it near the woods." It's the first sweet thing you've tasted in weeks, and somehow it tastes even sweeter coming from her hands. You don't speak, you just sit together, chewing slowly, watching the stars blink into the night sky one by one. For a fleeting moment, it feels like companionship, like something deeper might be taking root beneath the cold earth of obligation. Still, every interaction carries the weight of the unspoken. You have not touched her beyond what tradition required. You sleep in the same bed but never speak of what happened that first night. There's a silence around it that neither of you wants to disturb. Perhaps it's fear, perhaps it's decency, perhaps it's simply exhaustion. Your mother grumbles often now, muttering about how your wife is not yet pregnant. She throws side eyes at your stomach when you cough and insists on brewing odd teas made from roots and bark. You overhear her telling a neighbor, "If she can't give us a grandson by spring, maybe we married him to the wrong girl." You want to defend your wife, to tell your mother to keep her sharp tongue in her own mouth, but you know it would be useless. Age grants authority, not wisdom. And besides, in this world, a woman's value is still measured by how many children she can squeeze out before she breaks. Later that week, you travel to the next village over for the harvest, for a rare break from routine and a place to barter for new tools and old gossip. You and your wife walk there together, the journey long and muddy, but oddly peaceful. She doesn't speak much, but she hums, a soft tune that reminds you of birds at dawn. When you reach the fair, the crowd is loud and chaotic, pigs squealing, merchants yelling, children running with sticky hands and stolen apples. You watch her eyes widen at the colorful fabrics and silver trinkets on display. You know you can't afford any of it, but still, you buy her a ribbon deep blue, like twilight. She smiles, just barely, and tucks it into her sleeve. It's the first smile you've seen from her. a small rebellion against the dullness of duty. On the walk back, she asks if you've ever been in love. The question nearly knocks the wind out of you. You don't answer right away. You think of the girl you once kissed behind the stable, the way her hair smelled like lavender and wood smoke, the way she moved to another village and married someone richer. You say, "No, not really," and she nods, as though that was the answer she expected. She says, "Me neither." That night, lying side by side in the dark, you turn slightly and whisper, "Do you want this? Any of this?" There's a long silence. Then she says, "I don't know, but I want it to matter." It's not a yes, not a no, but it's honest. And in this world of unasked questions and unwelcome answers, honesty feels like a kind of miracle. A few days later, you find her crying softly in the shed. She hides her face, ashamed. You don't ask why. You just sit beside her, silent, letting her cry. Eventually, she leans into your shoulder, and the two of you stay there until the sun sets and the fireflies rise. It's not love, not yet, but it's something fragile and human and real. You begin to wonder if, perhaps, not all marriages start with love, but some might find their way to it through shared silence, shared pain, shared stubbornness. Historians debate this to whether medieval couples found affection through the grind of daily life or simply endured each other until death finally made things less crowded. There are love letters from nobles, poems from monks who ran off with serving girls, and old court records of husbands petitioning for the return of wives they truly missed. But how many peasants left behind poems, how many quiet wives' voices were never written down? You'll never know, but you wonder. And in wondering, you begin to see your wife not as a stranger forced into your bed, but as another soul trapped in the same slow wheel of history. She's not just your woman. She's a woman, whole, complicated, angry, curious. One night, weeks after the fair, she turns to you as the candle burns low and says, "If I have a daughter, I want her to choose." You blink, surprised. "Choose what?" "Everything," she whispers. And then, as the flame dies, so does the conversation, but the idea lingers, warm and glowing in the dark. Asterisk. The days begin to blur together in a kind of slow, grinding hazage, one starting before the sun with the shrill call of a rooster, and ending with the hiss of firewood in a smoky hearth. Your wife has taken to wearing the blue ribbon you gave, her like a quiet badge of defiance, weaving it into her braid on feast days and once even tying it around a loaf of bread she baked for a neighbor. She moves with more confidence now, though still quiet, still cautious, as if every step she takes through the cramped, muddy paths of your village must be carefully measured. And while your marriage still resembles a fragile truce more than a partnership, you begin to notice subtle shifts, shared glances, unspoken understandings. The way she touches your shoulder briefly when handing you a bowl of stew. It's not exactly affection, but it's something warmer than mere routine. Still, the weight of expectation hangs heavy. Your mother, whose patience is as short as the village ale supply, has started making louder and louder remarks about childbearing. She tells stories at supper about women who gave birth to 6 sons before they were 20, and she prays just a bit too loudly for fruitful wombs. Your father stays quiet, nodding along while chewing meat that's been boiled into oblivion, but you can tell he's counting the days. In this world, a marriage without children is a suspicious thing and unnatural one, and soon even the neighbors begin asking pointed questions with syrupy smiles. And then, one morning, your wife doesn't rise at her usual hour. The hearth remains cold. The water buckets are still empty. You wake to silence and find her curled beneath the blanket, pale and sweating. Fear jolts through you. Illness here is no small thing. It is shadow and death hiding behind every cough you fetch. The old healer, a woman with crooked fingers and a breath that smells like dried mushrooms. She peers at your wife, mutters prayers to saints you've never heard of, and feeds her a mixture of herbs and honey. She pulls you aside and says, she's not ill, she's carrying. The words feel like stones dropped into a still pond. Carrying a child. You stare at the wall, then back at your wife, who has closed her eyes and turned away. There's no celebration, no cheering, just silence. Heavy, slow, and uncertain. You thought this would be the moment everything changed. That there would be joy, or relief, or maybe pride. Instead, there's just a deep, gnawing fear, not for you, but for her. She's too small, too young. And you've seen what childbirth does to women. You've heard the screams, seen the blood-stained straw, felt the grief in the tight-lipped faces of men carrying tiny coffins. The village pretends childbirth is a miracle, but it's a battlefield, a lottery, and the midwives are not angels, they are triage nurses with knives and boiling water. Still, word spreads. People begin congratulating you in the streets. A piglet is gifted to your family. The priest visits and sprinkles holy water over your threshold while your wife lies in bed, unmoving. Your mother is suddenly all warmth and pride, bustling around the house with renewed purpose, sewing small clothes and muttering about strong boys and family honor. Your wife does not speak of the child. She merely goes through the motions, rising slowly when she can, sitting longer by the fire, folding and refolding the same cloth over and over. At night, you lie beside her and listen to the quiet no longer filled with fear, but something else now. Anticipation, dread, hope. Historians still argue whether the average peasant woman had any true maternal joy, or whether children were just another labor to endure. Infant mortality was high, many babies never lived past their name day. Yet families kept growing, driven by necessity and the church's decree that procreation was both sacred and expected. Children meant help in the fields. They meant lineage, dowry potential, and the faint possibility of support in old age. But they also meant danger. Every pregnancy could be a death sentence. Still, the cycle continued. The seasons changed. Winter crept in with its brittle fingers and long nights. You chopped wood until your hands bled and tried to keep the house warm, stuffing straw into the wall cracks and placing hot stones near the bed. Your wife grew slower, quieter. Her body changed. Her eyes grew distant. She no longer braided the blue ribbon into her hair. One night, she finally speaks. "I don't want to die." The words are so soft, so simple, they hit harder than any scream. You don't know what to say. You want to promise her safety, to tell her she'll be fine. But you can't, because you've seen too much. So instead, you take her hand, you hold it, that's all. Sometimes that's all there is. When the time comes, it's during a snowstorm. The wind howls through the village like an angry spirit, rattling shutters and smothering sound. The midwife arrives in a flurry of cloaks and herbs, barking orders. Boiling water, lighting candles. You're told to wait outside. You do. You wait in the cold, pacing through the snow, your boots soaked and your breath thick in the air. The hours pass. The screams start. You press your hands over your ears, but the sound cuts through everything. The pain in her voice is animal, raw, ancient. You whisper prayers to saints you've never trusted and promise everything if only. She lives, and then silence. A silence so loud it makes you sick. The door creaks open. The midwife appears. Her face is unreadable. You step forward. She nods, once. A girl, she says. She's weak, but breathing. So is the mother. You fall to your knees in the snow, not in joy, not in triumph, but in sheer collapse. You enter the house and find her holding a tiny bundle, wrapped in wool. Her face is pale, her eyes exhausted, but she looks at you for the first time not with fear, not with distance, but with something else. A weary peace. She says, she has your nose. You laugh, shakily. Poor thing, for the first time in months, the house feels full. Not just of people, but of something softer, fragile, real. The villagers visit, bring stale bread and awkward blessings. Your mother weeps. The priest returns and performs the baptism in a bowl of lukewarm water. Your daughter cries, and it is the most beautiful sound you've ever heard. In the following days, you become something new, not just a husband, not just a worker, but a father. You learn how to rock her to sleep, how to change swaddles, how to soothe cries with gentle humming. Your wife watches, and one night she says, "Maybe this won't be so bad." You don't reply, you just keep humming, because maybe she's right, or maybe not. But for the first time, you don't feel trapped. You feel needed, anchored, changed. The snow begins to melt. Spring creeps in with shy green shoots and birdsong. Life goes on, as it always does, as it always must. You walk to the edge of the field one morning, baby in arms, and stare at the sunrise. You think of the journey you've taken from unwilling, groomed to unsure partner, to someone standing in a thawing field holding a tiny, wriggling future, and it hits you. This isn't a love story in the way you imagined. It's something messier, braver, a story of survival, of compromise, of learning to care when no one taught you how. And maybe, just maybe, that's a kind of love, too. Asterisk. Spring arrives slowly, like a guest uncertain whether they're truly welcome, trailing behind melting snow and swollen rivers, while the village stirs back to life with cautious optimism and a cautious eye on the still grey skies. You've been a father for nearly 2 months now, though it still doesn't feel real, not in the way stories used to describe it, with triumph or poetic joy, but in the quiet, relentless way that reality settles into your bones. Your daughter, swaddled in coarse linen and nursed through the long nights by your ever-watchful wife, is tiny, bird-like, and stubborn in her cries. Her breath is shallow but steady. Every small coo or stretch feels like a miracle. You find yourself watching her sleep for long moments, not out of awe, but out of sheer disbelief that something so fragile, so soft, could survive here, in this world of cold floors and colder expectations. Your wife has changed, too. Not dramatically, but subtly, like a worn wall that's been repainted in the same color, only this time with thicker, more deliberate strokes. She doesn't braid her hair anymore. There's no time. The blue ribbon sits now in the wooden chest beside your bed, folded neatly, waiting for a day when there's enough calm to remember beauty. Her hands are rougher, her voice more measured. She speaks when needed, not often, but her gaze is steadier, heavier, as if childbirth didn't just bring forth a child, but awakened some older, quieter part of her, woman not to be dismissed. And you've become quieter, too. You speak less at meals, laugh less at the villagers' crude jokes, and listen more intently to your wife's advice. especially when she talks about managing the household stores or how much bread to save for trade. This new life father, husband, provider is no longer a role you wear like a borrowed coat. It has become your skin. But the world beyond your cottage walls doesn't stop. The village continues its grind. The fields must be tilled, the taxes paid, and the Lord's steward has already visited twice this month to collect grain and offer thin smiles that vanish the moment you look away. The church is no less demanding. Father Emmerich, the local priest, delivers sermons on obedience, chastity, and duty with all the subtlety of a hammer. And though he blesses your daughter with a flourish of holy water and Latin verse, he also reminds you that girls are a trial sent to teach humility. You nod, of course, that's what's expected. But inside, something clenches. You look at your daughter's tiny face and think, if this is a trial, it's one I'll gladly endure. Historians still argue whether most medieval fathers formed emotional bonds with their daughters, or if they simply viewed them as future brides, barter pieces in the great familial economy. The truth likely falls somewhere between those dusty scrolls and the whispered stories. Men who hardened themselves against loss but couldn't help softening when a small hand grabbed their finger. At night, when the house falls into deep silence, you sometimes sing to her not songs you learned, because there were none but tunes you make up, awkward and slow, murmured more than sung. Your wife listens, says nothing, but once you catch her humming along. Those moments keep you alive, even as exhaustion eats at your bones like a hungry dog, and it is exhausting. Your sleep comes in snatches now, dreams fogged by worry. Your hands are blistered, your back aches from endless planting, and the hunger never quite leaves. Meat is a rare luxury, milk is for the child, and your own belly knows only roots, bread, and hope. Still, you persist, because now there's no room for collapse. You're no longer responsible just for yourself or your wife, you're a lifeline. Every day you don't rise is a day something vital is left undone. And yet, beneath the duty, something else is growing. It's not joy, exactly, but it's kin to it, an odd sort of fulfillment that comes from creating stability out of chaos, from watching your child grow heavier, from knowing you chopped the wood that kept her warm. There is pride there, the quiet kind that doesn't need celebration. Your neighbors begin to notice the change in you. The older men nod to you more often. A few call you father with a chuckle, like you've been inducted into some bitter fraternity of responsibility. The women speak to your wife with slightly less condescension, asking for advice on cloth dye or souring milk, and your mother, finally, begrudgingly, praises her for being strong for a slip of a girl. Still, you know better than to relax. Tragedy in the village is always just one step behind the door. One week, a baby 2 houses down dies in her sleep, and the wailing can be heard across the fields. The next, a young mother takes fever and slips away before the healer can arrive. You see death often now, in small ways, brown spots on the barley, a neighbor's sudden limp, a distant cough that never quite fades. The world does not pause for parenthood. The seasons march forward, and with them come new dangers. The summer brings heat and drought, and soon the river runs lower than you've ever seen it. Water becomes a commodity. Tempers rise. The crops begin to wither, and panic sets in like mildew. You ration carefully, skipping meals more often than not, claiming you're just not hungry, while your wife divides meager portions with grim precision. Your daughter remains small, but her cries are strong now, insistent, almost defiant. She clenches her fists like she's ready to fight the world. You tell her stories, mostly made up, about brave girls who tame wolves and steal rain from the sky. Your wife listens and says, "You should write those down." You laugh because you've never held a pen, but the idea lingers. Still, not everything is poetry. One day you catch your daughter's foot snagged in a torn blanket, purple from poor circulation. Panic grips you like a vice, and you rush her to the healer, only to be told it's nothing, just cold air and tight wrapping. But it rattles you. You sit awake that night, staring into the fire, wondering how many more scares you can take before something truly goes wrong. Your wife joins you, wraps a shawl around your shoulders, and leans her head against you. "She'll be all right," she says. "We'll make sure of it." And in that moment, you realize how far you've come, not just in distance from the altar where you once stood, dumb and terrified, but in depth. You and your wife, once strangers yoked together by duty, have become something else entirely, partners. Not in the grand romantic sense, but in the only way that matters, tied not by fire, but by the shared labor of love, by every sleepless night, every burned loaf, every scraped knee. This wasn't a marriage born of choice, but somehow, through quiet kindness and mutual resilience, it has become one of substance. And perhaps that is the dark truth hidden beneath the legends of medieval weddings. Not that they were joyless, but that they demanded more than joy. They demanded endurance, transformation, and the relentless choosing of one another, day after unglamorous day. The rooster crows again, earlier than usual. The wind outside smells faintly of rain. You rise without complaint, kiss your daughter's warm head, and begin your day not as a prisoner, but as a man who has, against all odds, built a life where none was promised. The rain finally comes after a long, brittle drought, and when it does, it comes with a fury, drenching the fields in muddy torrents and turning the village paths into thick, sucking mire. You're grateful at first. Water means life, and the cracked soil gulps it greedily, but by the second week of endless downpour, roofs begin to leak, grain stores turn moldy, and livestock sink up to their knees in the muck. Your house, patched over the years with uneven stones and sagging timbers, doesn't hold up well. You spend hours on the roof, stuffing straw and clay into gaps, but it's no use. Every morning you find puddles near the cradle, and your wife spends half her day wringing out blankets. The baby is feverish now, small and warm, and not crying nearly as much as she used to. That silence terrifies you. Your wife tries to stay, calm, sponging her forehead, whispering stories, but the fear behind her eyes betrays her. You fetch the healer again, who shrugs and gives you dried herbs, muttering something about nature's course. You want to shake her, to scream, but instead you nod and thank her, because what else is there to do? This is the medieval reality medicine by chance, miracles rare, and most outcomes written in the stars before they begin. You stay up all night that week, feeding your daughter teaspoons of water, keeping the fire blazing, praying under your breath to saints whose names you barely remember. And somehow, impossibly, she recovers. She opens her eyes, cries weakly, and reaches for your wife's finger with a trembling grip. You sob without shame, and your wife does too, clutching the child as if she could vanish into smoke. It's a turning point, more quiet, but deeply felt. The rain eventually slows, and the village begins to dry. Crops are half lost, but not everything is ruined. Life claws forward. You take your daughter outside to feel the sun again. She squints, sneezes, then giggles a strange, soft sound like hope given voice. You look at your wife and she smiles. For the first time in weeks. Not a polite smile, a real one. You return to work with new resolve. The soil is softer now, workable. You dig with your bare hands when the plow fails. Plant new seeds with aching care. Every kernel feels precious. Every sprout a promise. The villagers, hardened by centuries of hardship, move on as they always do. But there's a heaviness in the air, a communal weariness, the weight of knowing how close death always hovers. At market, people speak more softly now, with fewer jokes, as if laughter might tempt fate. And while the church holds another mass to give thanks for the deliverance from plague, no one feels particularly delivered. Your wife, always efficient, begins organizing the household like a steward. She tracks stores, arranges, preserves, barters with neighbors. You watch her blossom not into some ideal of womanhood, but into something more real, more grounded. A survivor, a strategist, a mother who refuses to be caught unprepared again. She's teaching you, too, in subtle ways, how to dry herbs properly, how to spot spoiled milk, how to quiet a baby with rhythmic tapping. You follow her lead without resentment. Pride has no place here. In the evenings, the two of you sit beside the hearth, baby asleep between you, and you sometimes speak not of love, not yet, but of plans. Winter will come again, and you'll need more firewood, a stronger roof, better salt. There's talk of buying a goat, perhaps even acquiring another small plot of land if the steward looks kindly on your offer. These aren't dreams, they're strategies. Dreams are for nobles and poets. You build toward survival, toward the possibility that maybe maybe next year won't be quite so cruel. Historians often describe peasant life as brutish and short, but that description misses the quiet tenacity of lives like yours. It misses the moments of ingenuity, of whispered jokes in the field, of mothers humming lullabies into the straw. You and your wife are not part of history's grand battles or courtly intrigues. You are two threads in the larger, often ignored tapestry of what actually held the world together. And despite everything, despite a wedding built on arrangement, an obligation, you're starting to feel something that almost resembles peace. One afternoon, as you're chopping wood, your wife calls you in. She's holding the baby, now chubby with health, and she points to the hearth. You should tell her a story, she says. You blink. Why me? Because you have a good voice, she says simply. So you sit, awkward at first, and spin a tale about a fox who stole a knight's boots and became the queen of the forest. Your daughter gurgles, amused by your silly voices. Your wife watches with that soft smile again. And for a moment, the world outside doesn't matter. It's just you, your daughter, your wife, and a fire that crackles like applause. But peace is not permanent. One evening, the steward arrives with a scroll and a seal. The Lord's eldest son is to be married, and a special tax is to be collected from every household in the region. Joy for the castle means sacrifice for the village. You must give grain, or silver, or labor. You have none of the first two, so you offer the third. For 3 weeks, you were conscripted to work on the Lord's estate, mending fences, repairing roads, clearing brush. You leave before dawn, return after dark. Your hands bleed, your back screams, and all the while, you wonder how your wife is faring alone. But she manages, of course she does. When you finally return, filthy and sore, the house is cleaner than you left it. The child well fed, and your wife waiting with stew and silence. You sit beside her that night and murmur, "I missed you." She doesn't answer, but she puts her hand over yours, and it's enough. Weeks pass, your daughter learns to crawl. Your wife begins teaching her to mimic sounds, clapping her hands in rhythm. You laugh for the first time in what feels like months. You tell her she'll be smarter than both of us. Your wife smirks. She already is. Life continues in its slow, grinding miracle. You become, in your own way, content. Not happy this life doesn't allow for such luxury, but settled, rooted. Then one night, as you lie beside your wife, you say, "I think I love you." She doesn't answer at first. You hear her breathing, long and measured. Then, quietly, she whispers, "I know," and that's it. No dramatic declarations, no fairy tale. Just two tired people who fought through duty, through fear, through hunger and silent sand found, beneath the debris, a partnership made not of romance, but of earned respect. And that, in the end, is more lasting. Asterisk, asterisk. Summer returns with golden days and biting insects. The air thick with the smell of tilled soil, dung, and distant fires. And your village breathes a little easier now, as if the last year's wounds have scabbed over just enough to let people laugh again, soft, hesitant laughs, like testing the weight of joy after too long without it. You wake earlier these days, not out of dread but routine. Your body so used to labor it moves before your mind has caught up. Your daughter toddles now, legs wobbly but determined, arms outstretched like a drunken knight charging into battle. And watching her, you feel something you never felt before, an ache that is both pride and fear. Because you know what this world does to small, soft things. She follows you like a shadow, babbling words that resemble your name but sound more like spells. And your wife watches her with a smile that carries centuries in it. The kind of weary affection passed from mother to daughter across generations. Of repetition. The house creaks with life nor your daughter's footsteps. Your wife's singing, the rhythm of grinding flour, of pouring broth, of folding linens and dreams. But you're not fooled. You know peace like this never stays. One evening, while repairing the thatched roof with a neighbor, you hear that the Baron's youngest son has been killed, some border skirmish, some petty noble quarrel that leaves young men gutted in fields far from home. The village murmurs in fear. When a noble bleeds, it's always the peasants who must mop it up. Sure enough, within days, a crier arrives. The Baron is raising levies. Men are needed. Horses, tools, grain. You're not conscripted yet, but the threat hangs in the air like storm clouds, and every man in the village begins walking straighter, working harder, hoping visibility will make them indispensable enough to be left behind. Your wife says nothing about it at first, but one night, as you watch the fire die, she whispers, "If they take you, what will we do?" You don't have an answer. No one does. There are no pensions for the dead, no medals for the missing. Just empty places at tables and children who stop asking questions. You sharpen your tools more obsessively now, as if well-honed blades can hold off fate. You build a fence around the small vegetable patch, replace rotting beams in the barn. Teach your wife how to check for foxholes near the chicken coop. These are not acts of fear, but preparation. The quiet stacking of sandbags against a flood you cannot see yet, but know will come. And still, life insists on itself. Your daughter says her first full sentence, "Papa, look," while pointing at a butterfly, and your wife laughs, actually laughs. with her head tilted back and eyes crinkled in a way that reminds you she's still young, still human beneath the weight of the years. You begin marking time not by seasons or taxes, but by your daughter's milestones, her first tooth, her first fall, her first stubborn refusal to eat cabbage. You start to tell her stories again, longer ones now, with proper villains and heroes, with clever girls who solve riddles and escape towers without needing to be rescued. Your wife listens, sometimes correcting details, sometimes adding her own flourishes. You find yourselves talking more, not just about chores or survival, but about childhood memories, about the future, not grand plans, but simple hopes. A second child maybe, a stronger roof, a good harvest. Historians still debate whether peasants truly dreamed beyond their daily struggle, or if they simply existed within it. But sitting there by the fire, your wife braiding your daughter's hair with steady fingers, you know dreaming never left it, just got quieter. And yet, the world keeps intruding. Rumors spread like fire. A nobleman poisoned by his own steward. A convent raided a village 2 counties over, burned in a land dispute. And then it happens. A squire arrives with a list. Your name is not on it this time, but your neighbor's is. You help him pack. He has 3 sons, the youngest still feeding at the breast. He doesn't cry, doesn't curse, just folds his tunic, sharpens his knife, and hugs his wife for longer than usual. You watch from your doorway, holding your daughter in your arms, her head resting on your shoulder. She's too young to understand, but you whisper anyway, remember his face, because you know it might be the last time you see it. Your wife doesn't speak that night. She stirs the stew in silence, serves you both, then sits beside you. On the floor, her head leaning gently against yours. That night, in bed, she says, "We should have another." You blink, child. "Yes," she says, "while we still can, before something takes you." You want to argue, to say it's foolish, to say the world is too cruel, but instead, you nod, because her voice isn't desperate, it's determined, like a farmer planting seeds even as smoke rises on the horizon. Over the next weeks, something changes between you. The quiet partnership you've shared begins to soften, to warm into something that feels a little more like love, not the love of songs or tales, but the kind that's built brick by brick, callus by callus. You touch her hand more often. She lingers in your arms longer. Your daughter senses it too, nestling between you at night like a bridge you both built together. The village begins preparing for winter again. The harvest is decent, not great, but enough. The well doesn't dry. You help an older man repair his cart, and he repays you with half a salted pig. You trade for flour, for oil, for a small doll carved from birch. When you give it to your daughter, she squeals with joy and runs straight to your wife to show her. You watch them from the doorway, the sun warm on your back, and you think, this is it. This is the thing worth fighting for. That night, you and your wife lie awake, listening to the wind. She asks, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" you ask. "Marrying me, this life." You turn to her, brushing hair from her forehead. "Every part of it was hard," you say, "but no, I don't regret it, because it brought me you and her." And this, she closes her eyes. Good, that single word carries the weight. Of all the things she's never said, all the fears she's swallowed, all the hope she's dared to hold. You kiss her brow, gently, reverently, and you fall asleep with her hand in yours. You dream not of war or famine or taxes, but of a small house full of laughter and muddy footprints and bread rising on a clean wooden shelf. You wake before dawn, as always, but something is different. There's a stillness, a kind of deep peace. You lie there for a moment, watching your wife sleep, the curve of her shoulder, the rise and fall of her breath. Your daughter stirs, murmurs in her sleep, then settles again. And for a brief, golden moment, you think, maybe we've earned this. Maybe this can last. Outside, the rooster crows, the fire crackles, the world, brutal and vast, waits. But for now, you are not afraid. You rise, stretch, and begin the day. Autumn bleeds into the landscape slowly, brushing the treetops with rust and gold, crisping the air in the mornings and dusting the village with that familiar smell of drying herbs, smoke, and the thick, earthy scent of decay that means both death and preparation. You notice the changes in the land the same way you notice them in your wife, the subtle shifts, the quiet strength beneath the surface. Her belly is beginning to swell again. It's not obvious yet to the village, but you both know, and this time there's a certain calm to it, not the stunned fear of the first child, but a kind of steady, almost defiant resolve. This is your choice now, your second child, not born of obligation, but of hope. Your daughter, barely 2, senses the change in the air too. She clings more often to her mother, curls her fingers around her tunic when other villagers approach, stares with wide, wary eyes at anything new. She's a sensitive one, always watching, always absorbing the world in a way that makes you wonder what her mind holds, already memories too young for words, emotions too big for her tiny frame. She still giggles at foxes in the fields and claps when you make up silly songs, but she also sits quietly beside your wife when she's working, mimicking her gestures as if memorizing what it means to be a woman in this world. Your wife smiles at this, but there's sorrow in it too. A knowing look. She tells you she need to be stronger than I was, and you understand, because strength here doesn't mean loudness or fire. It means patience, endurance, knowing when to bend and when to hold. It's the kind of strength only women seem to possess in the face of centuries pressing down on them. The harvest is modest. The turnips came in thick, the barley patch was patchy, and the apple tree you planted in your first year as husband gave only 3 sour little fruits. You shared them anyway, 1 each, and the last one split between your daughter and a neighbor's boy whose father was lost to conscription that spring. The village has been quieter since the levies. Fewer men, more tired women, more children left to play by the stream, while their mothers haggle over cloth or knead dough with one arm while nursing a baby with the other. You're working harder now, not just for your family, but because so many others are gone, and the work doesn't care about grief. The steward hasn't returned, and rumors say he's dead. You're not sure if that means a reprieve or another tax. The new steward is younger, colder, and carries himself like a man who's read too many sermons about obedience. When he rides into the village with his guards, your daughter hides behind your wife's skirt, peeking out with curious, frightened eyes. He doesn't notice her. You wish you could keep it that way forever. One evening, as you're stacking firewood, a stranger appears near the edge of your land. Not a noble, not a priest, just a man in travel-worn clothes, carrying a satchel and wearing a ring with a chipped green stone. He asks for water, and you offer it, wary but not unkind. He drinks deeply, wipes his mouth, then looks at your house and says, "You've done well." You stiffen. "Do I know you?" He smiles. "No, but I knew your father." That name strikes something cold inside you. Your father, long dead, was a hard man, a silent one, a man who measured his affection in expectations and corrections. The stranger tells you stories, things you never knew, that your father once refused a conscription, that he took a beating for shielding a neighbor's daughter from a knight's advances, that he wasn't cruel, just scared, and somehow that makes it worse. You thank the man. He nods and leaves before sunset. You never see him again, but you think of him for weeks, wondering how many stories about your own life might one day be told to your children by strangers. That night, you sit with your wife in the quiet. She's sewing, her fingers swift and practiced. You tell her what the man said. She listens, then simply says, "You're not him," and that, more than anything, settles your heart. Because you've spent years fearing you might become the same kind of distant figure. But your daughter knows your voice, runs to you with scraped knees, falls asleep with her head against your chest. You've changed the path, even if just by a little. Historians often romanticize lineage, legacy, the passing of names and titles, but they forget the quiet revolutions, the small, invisible rebellions made not with swords or laws, but with bedtime stories and acts of tenderness in a world built on indifference. The wind turns colder, and with it comes frost. You dig trenches around the house to redirect rain. You fix the chimney. You kill your first pig of the season and salt the meat with your wife while your daughter watches, eyes wide. She doesn't cry at the blood. She only asks, "Was it bad?" And your wife says, "No, it was just done." Winter arrives in a flurry of white and silence. The village slows. You spend more time indoors now, telling stories, carving toys from leftover wood, teaching your daughter little songs. Your wife's belly is round and tight. She moves slower, but her eyes are clear, focused. She's done this once before and knows what to expect. Still, at night, you see the fear in her, the flicker of doubt, the memory of that first terrible labor. You hold her hand when she can't sleep. You kiss her temple and say nothing, because no words will make it easier. You're just there, and sometimes that's enough. The birth comes on a night so cold, the windows frost from the inside. Your daughter is sent to a neighbor's, half asleep and confused. The midwife arrives again, older now, her hands slower but still steady. The hours drag. Your wife screams, once just one sound, then it's a blur of sweat, steam, silence, and then crying, a boy, healthy, whole. You cry again, openly, without shame. Your wife, pale and shaking, smiles weakly and says, "He has your ears." And you laugh, because it's true. They stick out. And your daughter, when she returns, points and says, "He looks like a little bat." You name him after your wife's father, a man you never met, but who once carved his name into the church door during a flood to mark how high the water had risen. You hold your son and whisper, "Let the world try," because now, somehow, your family is four. The house feels fuller. The fire seems warmer. The air, even in winter, feels less cruel. And though the wind still howls, and the steward still rides, and the taxes still loom, you stand at the edge of your land, 2 children asleep inside, your wife humming softly by the hearth, and you say to yourself, "This is the life they never told us about, the real one, the one you build, not inherit." And you turn, and you go back inside, because the world is wide and dark, but here, in this little corner, you've made light. Winter loosens its grip slowly, as if reluctant to release the village from its icy embrace. And when spring finally creeps back into the fields, it brings with it a cautious optimism, tempered by months of hardship and loss. The snow has thawed, the ground softens underfoot, and the sap in the trees begins to rise. Signs your wife watches closely, timing the planting of early vegetables with a precision born of experience and necessity. Your son, now a sturdy infant with curious eyes, lies wrapped in layers of wool on the hearth, surrounded by the faint smell of smoke and dried herbs, while your daughter runs circles around the house, laughter spilling out like wild birdsong, chasing the few stray chickens that have survived the winter's chill. The household buzzes with activity, not just the struggle for survival, but a slow building of life, the way moss creeps over stone, patient and insistent. You find yourself increasingly caught between exhaustion and hope, the grinding labor of the fields balanced by these small miracles, tiny hands reaching for yours. A woman humming a lullaby, the earth giving up its secrets in shoots and buds. Yet, beneath this fragile peace, the pressures of the wider world remain relentless. Taxes are due, and you have less grain than the steward demands. Debts from the previous season still hang over your head like storm clouds. You barter what little you have for silver to pay the Lord's share. Fearing the harsh consequences of failure stories, you've heard whispered late at night about families evicted, homes burned, children orphaned. The local church continues to preach obedience, blessing marriages and baptisms, while reminding you that this life is but a trial before the eternal reward. And though the words offer some solace, they also carry a cold distance that never quite reaches your heart. Your wife grows more involved in the village community, trading favors with other women, sharing knowledge about herbs and healing, lending strength where the Lord's power is absent. Her quiet authority grows, recognized by the neighbors in nods and smiles. Subtle but powerful affirmations that she is not just a wife or mother, but a keeper of wisdom and resilience. You learn from her, watch her, and in this learning find a deeper respect than the one bred from youthful fear or obligation. Your daughter's world expands as she begins to speak more clearly, her imagination blooming in the wild spaces beyond your small home. The woods, the streams, the abandoned mill. You catch her staring for long moments at the horizon, as if sensing the vastness beyond the village, and you wonder what dreams flicker in her mind beneath that solemn gaze. She's becoming a girl of this earth both tender and fierce, and you feel an unfamiliar pang, a mixture of pride and dread, knowing the hardships she will face and the strength she will need. Your son, too, grows, though more slowly, his quiet temperament a counterpoint to his sister's exuberance. You cradle him at night and whisper promises, even though you know promises are fragile things here, easy to break beneath the weight of hunger, sickness, or the Lord's whims. The seasons turn. Spring melts into summer, and the village swells with life and noise once again. You work in the fields from dawn until dusk, the sun beating down, sweat mixing with dirt, hands rough and calloused. You're no longer just a man trying to survive. You are a farmer, a father, a husband who has found in toil a kind of dignity that no feast or blessing could give. Yet, even as you reap your modest harvest, the shadow of war creeps closer. News travels slowly but surely. A neighboring county is rising in rebellion, nobles plotting and scheming, soldiers passing through with rumors of conscription and bloodshed. The steward grows harsher, more demanding, sending word that more taxes are required to fund the Lord's war effort. The village council debates quietly, their faces lined with worry and resignation. But there's no clear answer, only a shared sense of impending crisis. You prepare as best you can, storing grain, repairing fences, teaching your children what little you can about survival. Your wife watches you with a mixture of concern and determination, silently sharing the burden that no longer belongs to one alone but to all of you together. One evening, as twilight slips into night and the hearth fire crackles low, your wife turns to you and says, "We must teach them to endure, to fight, even if the fight is only for tomorrow." Her words settle in your chest like embers, glowing with a fierce truth that transcends the daily hardships. It is not just about survival anymore. It is about legacy, about the world you leave behind for these small faces that look up at you with unspoken trust. You nod, feeling the weight of her meaning. The children sleep nearby, unaware of the looming challenges, their dreams untroubled by the dangers that stalk the edges of your lives. You tell yourself and her that you will protect them as best you can, that you will build walls stronger than stone, shields forged from love and stubbornness. The village braces for the coming storm. The days grow shorter, colder, and your heart tightens with every sigh of the wind. Yet, amid the uncertainty, there is a quiet grace in the ordinary shared meal. A laugh over spilled milk, a child's hand in yours. You begin to see the dark truth beneath medieval weddings, not just as hardship or pain, but as the beginning of a life woven with resilience, sacrifice, and unexpected tenderness. It is a life where love is not always grand or easy, but it is real, persistent, and quietly powerful. You close your eyes, listening to the soft breaths of your family, the murmur of night settling over your home, and you hold on to that fragile hope that even in the darkest times, light can grow. Winter's grip loosens just enough for the first thaw to sneak through the frozen earth. A subtle whisper of warmth that brings both relief and unease as the village wakes from its harshest season. Blinking against the sharp light reflecting off the melting snow, you find yourself moving differently now, more cautious, more deliberate as the ground softens and your chores shift from preserving what remains to planting what might grow. The children, your daughter and your son, are restless after months of confinement. The girl's energy seems endless, her laughter breaking through the quiet like birdsong, while your son watches her with a shy curiosity, his tiny hands clenching and unclenching, as if testing his own strength. Your wife moves with a gentleness sharpened by the memory of the last childbirth, her hands more careful, her eyes scanning for signs of illness or distress in both children, in herself, and even in you. There's a fragile balance here, a delicate dance between hope and fear that you all learn to navigate together, day by day, breath by breath. The village is quieter than it was before, with fewer able-bodied men returning from the war, those conscripted and lost or maimed leaving behind widows who have taken up the plough, shopkeepers who now run both stalls and households, and children who grow up faster than they should. You see the changes etched on every face, the lines of worry and strength mingled, and you realize that the medieval wedding you once thought of as the start of a life is really the beginning of a long, unyielding battle for survival and identity. The steward's shadow looms larger this season, his demands heavier, and you find yourself negotiating trades more skillfully, learning which neighbors can be trusted and who might turn with the wind for profit. Your wife's knowledge of herbs and healing becomes a rare and precious commodity, sought after by those who can afford to barter for a tincture or poultice, and you watch her gain a quiet authority that even the village men respect. Your daughter is growing into her own kind of strength, stubborn and bright, while your son is still small but stubborn in his own way, clutching to you with a fierce loyalty that both humbles and terrifies you. You teach them what you can how, to identify edible roots, the names of the stars, the rhythm of seasons, but you know that much will be learned from the world itself, harsh and unpredictable as it is. Historians debate whether medieval family life was governed more by love or necessity, but in your heart, you understand it as a complex tapestry woven from both acts of tenderness hidden beneath layers of survival and duty. One day, a traveler passes through the village, a bard with a lute and stories of distant lands, who stops at your door and offers songs and laughter in exchange for food and shelter. Your wife welcomes him with hospitality, and the children listen wide-eyed as he spins tales of kings and battles, magic and betrayal, things that seem almost too grand for your small life, but remind you of the world beyond your fields. The bard's presence is a brief spark, a flicker of light in the otherwise steady rhythm of work and care, and when he leaves, you feel a strange emptiness alongside gratitude. In the quiet after his departure, your wife takes your hand and says softly, "We are the stories now." You think about that, how your life, with its small joys and relentless struggles, becomes the fabric of history, even if written in whispers, rather than chronicles. Spring gives way to summer, and with it comes the promise of new growth and the persistent threat of storms. You build stronger fences around your crops, repair the tools that have begun to wear thin, and teach your daughter how to weave baskets while your son naps nearby. The village holds a festival in honor of the saints, a rare occasion that brings everyone together for a night of food, music, and prayer, a momentary reprieve from the hardships that define your days. You watch your family dance in the flickering firelight, your wife's laughter mingling with the children's, your daughter spinning in circles, her hair wild and free, and you feel a surge of something close to peace. Yet, beneath the joy, you remain vigilant. News from the town tells of unrest, moles plotting, peasants rebelling, armies marching, and you know the fragile peace could shatter at any moment. You prepare accordingly, stockpiling grain, reinforcing your home, teaching your children the importance of caution alongside hope. One evening, as you sit by the fire, your wife asks you what you fear most. You think carefully, then answer, losing you, losing them, losing this. She nods, squeezing your hand, her eyes reflecting the flames. We fight to keep what matters, she says, and fight you do not just against the elements or the Lord's demands, but against the creeping despair that sometimes threatens to swallow you whole. You cling to each other, to the children, to the small acts of love and defiance that define your days. The year turns again, seasons cycling with indifferent grace, and you realize that the wedding day, the day that once seemed so terrifying and binding, was merely the first step in a journey far longer and more complex than you ever imagined. A journey marked not by grand gestures or heroic deeds, but by the slow, steady weaving of life in all its messy, painful, beautiful complexity. And in this weaving, you find meaning, resilience, and even, sometimes, joy. The cycle of seasons marches on relentlessly, each year layering new challenges atop the old as the village breathes in rhythms of sowing and reaping, birth and death, celebration and mourning, and you find yourself ever more deeply woven into this tapestry that is both harsh and beautiful. Spring has given way to summer's full blaze, and the heat hangs thick over the fields where you and your neighbors toil from dawn until dusk, sweat soaking into your clothes, hands cracked and blistered but steady, working to coax life from the stubborn soil. Your children have grown your daughter, now strong enough to help your wife tend the garden, carrying baskets of herbs with careful hands and a spark of pride in her eyes, while your son, still small but full of quiet determination, clings to your side, watching and learning the rhythms of the land and the household. Your wife has become a pillar in the community, her knowledge of healing and midwifery sought after by those in pain or peril, and you see in her a fierce strength tempered by compassion, a quiet force that holds the village together even as the lords tighten their grip and the taxes grow heavier. The steward, cold and watchful, visits more frequently now, reminding you of the debts owed, the obligations unfulfilled, and the fragile balance between submission and survival that governs your lives. You barter and negotiate, sometimes losing more than you gain, but always holding firm enough to keep your family fed and sheltered. One evening, as the sun dips low and paints the sky with streaks of crimson and gold, you sit outside your home, watching your daughter chase fireflies with a reckless abandon that makes your heart ache with both joy and fear. She looks at you with those bright eyes and asks, "Papa, what is a wedding?" You pause, surprised by the question, and consider how to answer. "It's a promise," you say slowly, "a promise to build a life together, no matter what comes." She nods thoughtfully and runs off to catch another glowing bug. And you realize that the wedding, the ceremony that once seemed so distant and formal, is now deeply personal, woven into the very fabric of your family's story. Your son tugs at your sleeve, wanting to hear a story, and you find yourself telling the tale of a brave knight and a clever maiden, making up the words as you go, weaving lessons about courage and kindness into the narrative. Your wife listens from the doorway, a soft smile touching her lips, and you feel a warmth that carries you through the long, tiring days. But life is never without hardship. News arrives that the Lord's men are conscripting more young men from neighboring villages to fight in a war that seems endless and senseless. The village grows quieter, the men fewer, the women and children forced to shoulder more of the burden. You watch as neighbors pack what little they can carry, faces hard with resolve or softened by tears. Your own heart tightens at the thought of your children growing up in such a world, and you vow silently to shield them as best you can. Your wife shares your fears but meets them with practical plans, storing food, reinforcing the house, teaching the children simple skills that might save them one day. The bond between you deepens in these moments, not just as husband and wife, but as co-conspirators in the quiet rebellion of survival and love. One night, as you sit by the fire, your daughter leans against your shoulder and asks about the stars, wondering if they watch over the village and your family. You look up at the vast sky, scattered with light, and whisper, "They do. They watch over us all, even when we cannot see them." Your wife joins you, holding your son close, and together you sit in the darkness, feeling the pulse of the world outside and the fragile flame of your home within. Historians often argue whether medieval marriages were purely transactional or held genuine affection. But your life shows you the truth is messy and layered an intricate dance of duty, love, fear, and hope that shapes every moment. The year turns again, bringing with it a harvest that is better than last, the fruit of your labor and endurance. The village holds a feast, small and simple, but filled with laughter and songs that echo into the night, reminders that even in hardship, humanity persists. Your wife dances with your daughter under the stars, their faces glowing with joy and lightness, while you watch, heart full and aching. You realize that the dark truth of medieval weddings is not just the hardships, the bindings, or the struggles, but the quiet, fierce love that grows in spite of everything, the love that roots you to this land, to each other, and to the generations yet to come. And in that love, you find a kind of peace, a fragile, beautiful thing worth every sacrifice and every hardship. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of your family, the soft murmur of the village settling to sleep, and you let yourself drift into dreams filled with hope and light. The wheel of the year turns once more, and with autumn's arrival, the village transforms under a canopy of amber and crimson. Leaves crunching beneath your boots as you trudge through familiar paths now slick with morning dew and the scent of damp earth. The air grows sharper, cooler, and a sense of urgency settles over your days as you and your family prepare for the coming winter with rituals as old as the stones underfoot. Your daughter, now nearly 5, flits about with a mix of childish glee and serious curiosity, helping your wife gather herbs, pointing out birds, and asking endless questions about the changing world that you answer as best you can, weaving tales that are part truth and part imagination to satisfy her hunger for stories. Your son, toddling with newfound confidence, wobbles after his sister, his small hands grasping at leaves and twigs, his laughter brightening the somber colors of the season. Your wife moves with steady grace, carrying the weight of pregnancy again, a visible reminder of the continuity you have carved out in a world often indifferent to such quiet triumphs. The house, modest and worn, has become a sanctuary filled with the smells of baking bread, drying herbs, and the soft murmur of whispered prayers and lullabies. The steward's visits, though less frequent now, remain a reminder that your peace is fragile, that the outside world, with its demands and dangers, waits just beyond the edge of your fields and hearth. You trade what you can, spare eggs, wool, bits of leather to keep the household running, always wary of the heavy hand that might come knocking with debts or orders. This life, you've learned, is a delicate balancing act, a dance between defiance and submission, hope and survival. Your daughter, growing bolder each day, has begun to understand the stories of your family, the struggles etched into their history, and sometimes she looks at you with eyes too old for her years, as if she knows the weight she carries already. You find yourself wondering what kind of world she will inherit, what lessons she will pass on, and whether the fragile peace you've built will hold. One evening, as the sun slips behind distant hills, casting long shadows over the village, you sit beside your wife by the fire, the soft glow illuminating her face and the swell of her belly, and you talk quietly of the future, not grand dreams, but simple hopes for health, safety, and enough to eat. She listens, nods, and shares her own fears, the ones she keeps hidden from the world but reveals in the safety of your presence. Together, you make plans to teach your children resilience, kindness, and the strength to endure whatever comes. The midwife arrives again when the snows have not yet fallen, a familiar figure whose hands bring both pain and life, and you hold your wife's hand through the long hours of labor, feeling her strength and courage in every breath and cry. Your daughter waits with a neighbor, clutching a worn doll, while you pace the small room, heart pounding with hope and fear. When the first cries break the silence, relief floods through you, and the midwife presents a daughter, a little sister. For your children, a new thread woven into your family's tapestry. You name her for the stars, a symbol of light and guidance in the dark times to come. The days that follow are tender and exhausting, filled with the quiet rhythms of feeding, soothing, and healing. and the village rallies around you in small ways. A loaf of bread here, a knitted blanket, they're acts of kindness that remind you that no one truly survives alone. Your daughter embraces her new role as big sister with surprising maturity, sharing her toys and teaching the baby sounds, while your son watches with wide eyes, slowly learning the ways of family and love. Yet, even in these moments of joy, the world beyond the village shifts and trembles with unrest, tremors of rebellion, the slow gathering of armies, the tightening grip of lords eager to crush dissent. You hear whispers of nobles clashing in distant halls, peasants rising and falling like waves, and you know that your fragile peace is always temporary. Still, you hold fast to the small lights in your life, the laughter of your children, the warmth of your wife's hand, the steady pulse of earth beneath your feet, and find strength in them to face whatever comes. Historians debate whether the medieval family was more a unit of economic necessity or emotional support. But you live the answer every day in the mix of sacrifice and tenderness, fear and hope that fills your home. One afternoon, you take your daughter and son to the edge of the woods, teaching them to recognize edible plants and warning them of hidden dangers. Your voice gentle but firm, your heart full of both pride and apprehension. You watch them explore, their faces alight with wonder, and think about the legacy you are building, not one of wealth or power, but of knowledge, love, and resilience. As the harvest festival approaches, you prepare the house for the celebrations, stringing herbs and flowers, baking what you can, and sharing what little you have with neighbors, knowing that in these communal moments lies the true strength of your people. The night of the festival arrives with music and dancing, flickering torchlight and the murmur of prayers, and you hold your family close, feeling the weight of history and the lightness of joy intertwined in a dance as old as time. You realize that the dark truths of medieval weddings, the hardships, the bindings, the sacrifices are only part of the story. Beneath them lies a profound human experience of connection, endurance, and love that refuses to be extinguished. As the fire burns low and the village settles into quiet, you close your eyes, breathing in the scent of smoke and earth and the soft rhythm of your family's breathing, and you allow yourself to dream not of kingdoms or conquests, but of a life built with your own hands, a life worth every struggle and every moment of grace. Asterisk. The first whispers of winter float through the village like soft snowflakes, settling over rooftops, fields, and the narrow paths that wind between familiar homes. And you feel the chill not only in the air, but deep within your bones as the days grow shorter and shadows lengthen, reminding you of the cycles that govern your life, the endless dance of growth and decay, hope and loss. Your family moves with the rhythm of the season, your wife tending the fire, your daughter helping with chores, your son wrapped in thick wool blankets, eyes bright despite the cold. The house feels smaller now, walls closing in with the weight of cold and the promise of long nights, but also fuller with the laughter and voices of children, the scent of drying herbs, and the quiet hum of everyday rituals that sustain you. The steward's visits grow less frequent, but no less threatening, his demands etched into the ledger that hangs on the wall like a silent spectre, a reminder that your existence is always contingent on forces beyond your control. You barter what you can, trade favors, and hold your tongue when he lectures, knowing resistance is costly and often futile. Yet the flicker of rebellion simmers beneath your skin, a quiet flame fed by the knowledge that your family's future depends on endurance and courage. The village gathers for winter preparations, sharing firewood, repairing roofs, and exchanging stories that mix fact and legend, weaving a tapestry of collective memory that binds you all together, even as hardship threatens to pull you apart. You teach your children the old songs, the stories of ancestors who survived famine, war, and plague, stories meant to inspire strength and resilience, to remind them that they stand on the shoulders of those who refused to give up. Your daughter grows bolder in these moments, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight as she asks questions about the past and the future. And you answer as honestly as you can, knowing that truth, like the cold, can both wound and heal. Your son listens quietly, absorbing the rhythms of your voice and the cadence of your words, learning the language of hope and survival that will carry him through the years to come. The pregnancy continues, your wife's strength tested but unbroken, and you find yourself more attentive than ever, anticipating the arrival of the new life that will once again reshape your family's story. The days blur into one another as you work, care, and prepare, a constant cycle of effort and rest, joy and exhaustion. Outside, the world remains unsettled. The distant rumble of conflict echoes faintly, reminding you that peace is fragile and fleeting. You hold your family close, finding comfort in their warmth and the simple acts of love that sustain you. A hand held, a whispered prayer, a shared meal. Historians debate whether the hardships of medieval weddings were a result of societal necessity or deliberate control, but you live the answer daily in the balance of sacrifice and tenderness, struggle and affection that defines your existence. One evening, as snow begins to fall softly outside your window, your wife brings your daughter to your bedside, the child clutching a small wooden carving you made during the long winter evenings, a horse, imperfect but filled with love. Your daughter's eyes shine with pride and wonder as she offers it to you, and you feel a surge of gratitude for these small moments that make the harshness bearable. You hold the carving carefully, tracing its rough edges, and whisper promises to your children, promises of protection, of love, of a future shaped by their courage and spirit. The newborn arrives just before the winter solstice, a quiet night filled with the soft sounds of labor and life, and you stand vigil beside your wife, holding her hand as she brings your youngest into the world. Fragile but fierce, a new thread in the tapestry you continue to weave. The village welcomes the child with quiet joy, neighbors bringing gifts of wool and bread, the midwife blessing the infant with words of hope and protection. You look at your growing family and feel the weight of generations, those who came before and those yet to command, the unbroken chain of love and survival that binds you all. As the snow blankets the world in silence, you sit by the fire, your wife resting, your children sleeping, and you allow yourself a rare moment of peace, knowing that whatever storms may come, you have built a sanctuary of warmth, resilience, and love. The dark truths of medieval weddings, the bindings, the hardships, the sacrifices are only part of the story. Beneath them lies a profound human experience of connection, endurance, and the fierce determination to carve out life and love in a world that often offers little. And as the night deepens and the fire crackles low, you close your eyes, feeling the steady heartbeat of your family and the quiet strength that will carry you through whatever dawn awaits. Asterisk. The long winter finally begins to loosen its grip, and as the first hesitant signs of spring tiptoe back into your village, the world seems to hold its breath in anticipation of renewal, the soft trickle of melted snow through cracked earth, the faint green shoots pushing stubbornly through frozen soil, and the air carrying that fresh, wet scent of new beginnings. Inside your home, the rhythms of life pulse steadily. Your wife's eyes, now lined with the quiet wisdom of countless seasons, watch over your growing children, whose laughter and cries fill the small rooms with the chaotic joy that defines your existence. Your daughter, ever curious and bold, traces the patterns in the woodwork and asks endless questions about the stars and the stories they tell, while your son, quieter but no less alive, begins to test his steps, his fingers reaching for the world with eager determination. The youngest child, still fragile but gaining strength, sleeps peacefully in your wife's arms, a living testament to your family's endurance and hope. The village around you stirs with similar signs of life. Neighbors emerge from their winter retreats, trading news and goods, sharing tales of hardship and hope, their voices carrying over the fields as if daring the cold to return. You tend your plots with renewed energy, working alongside other villagers whose faces show the same mixture of weariness and resilience. The steward's presence feels distant now, as if the cycles of power and control have momentarily shifted, leaving room for something gentler, if only for a while. You share meals around the hearth, stories and laughter weaving through the smoke and embers. And you begin to understand that the story of medieval weddings is far more than contracts or ceremonies. It is the foundation upon which life itself is built, a story of survival, adaptation, and the human capacity to love fiercely in the face of adversity. You teach your children about this legacy, not just the hardships, but the quiet triumphs, the moments of connection and joy that define your family. Historians still argue whether medieval weddings primarily served economic or social functions, but in your heart, you know they are about something deeper, the weaving together of lives, the birth of communities, the endurance of hope. One evening, as the sun sets and bathes the village in a golden glow, you walk with your family to the edge of the fields, watching the horizon stretch out wide and endless. A reminder that even in a world bound by duty and survival, there is freedom in love and life. You hold your wife's hand, your children close, and whisper a silent promise to protect, to nurture, to build a future where your family's story can continue, unfettered by the dark shadows of the past. The soft hum of night wraps around you like a comforting blanket as you return home. The flicker of candlelight guiding your way through familiar halls filled with memories and dreams. You settle by the fire, the gentle rise and fall of your children's breathing a lullaby that soothes your weary soul. The weight of history presses lightly now, not as a burden but as a mantle of strength, a testament to the endurance of love through time. The dark truths you have uncovered, bindings and hardships, obligations and sacrifices, fade gently into the background, replaced by the vibrant, living story of your family, a story that will ripple through generations like a quiet river, shaping the land. And as your eyes close and sleep enfolds you, you carry with you the knowledge that even in the darkest chapters, there is light born of connection, resilience, and the simple, profound act of holding one another close. Now, as the night deepens and the world around you slips into silence, let the soft cadence of this story lull you toward rest, a slow and steady breath that eases away worry and strife, leaving only peace and the warm glow of hope. Your family sleeps, your village dreams, and so do you, cradled by history and love, ready to face whatever dawn may bring. As you lie here now, enveloped in the quiet comfort of your room, the soft hum of the world outside blends with the gentle rhythm of your breath, a soothing cadence that eases you into a calm place where worries dissolve like morning mist. The story of medieval weddings, their bindings, their struggles, their surprising tenderness slowly fades into a whisper, leaving behind a warm glow of understanding and connection. Imagine the flicker of candlelight casting dancing shadows. On stone walls, the gentle murmur of voices sharing stories and laughter, the tender touch of a hand held through hardship. These are the threads that weave through time, connecting you to countless others who lived, loved, and persevered in the face of a world that was often harsh and unforgiving. So as you drift towards sleep, know that you carry their strength within. You the resilience to endure, the courage to hope, and the grace to find peace amidst the storm. Let the soft hush of night wrap around you like a blanket, and with each breath sink deeper into rest, letting go of the day's burdens and welcoming the calm that comes with surrender. Sleep well, knowing you are part of an unbroken chain of stories, a living testament to the power of love and endurance. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let this peaceful journey carry you gently into your dreams.